Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Construction Record Podcast. I'm digital media editor Warren Frey, and with me today I have.
Hi, I'm Adrian Price. I'm an architect principal of BDP Architects based in London.
And you worked on a Toronto project, The Well, which is a massive, massive project and with many aspects to it. You focused on retail, which still gives us plenty to talk about. The retail part is kind of a core part of the whole thing. I mean, it's office and it's living space, I think, too, and it's also retail. I'd like to start with that. This thing, I don't know if it was approved before the pandemic started, but the pandemic was when you built most of it. And did that give you pause, or did you have to change any of your design stuff because of the fact that all of a sudden nobody's going to shops?
Well, that's interesting because a lot's happened since we started this project. I think I first visited the site in February 2016. So it was, it was way ahead of the pandemic.
Right.
I think retail was already evolving a lot. I think it was becoming much more experiential. The people going to the same old shops in every place was losing its appeal. You have the challenge of online retail, which are steadily eroding into the market. But at the same time, there was a feeling that people were perhaps getting a bit bored with everything online, and having somewhere to meet friends and create a bit of an occasion was as relevant as ever. Yeah, you mentioned the changes. Well, I think the lockdowns did actually shift that online shopping that bit more. But when we came out of lockdown, people realized that they have to get out of their homes. They want to get out and meet friends. They want somewhere that is memorable and somewhere that they can enjoy as a place that's outside. So in fact, what we'd started undertaking with the design of the well proved actually to be very relevant, I think.
So let's talk about some of those features because like you said, it was kind of the mission statement to make this a different experience than standard shopping malls or anything. So you mentioned outside. Let's start with that. How did you, especially in Toronto, which isn't always warm or sometimes is very warm, how did you kind of address that?
Well, that's interesting because my first response was looking at the climate, which has more extremes than we're used to in the UK.
Yeah, for sure.
In the UK, we suffer from being wet a lot. So primary, thing is to keep people dry, but not necessarily, heat the spaces. My initial thought was perhaps we need to build an enclosed space, which keeps people warm and tempers the environment. But it transpired that the client already wanted to do something very different. In fact, they wanted that more European kind of feel where it's protected from the weather, but not shutting out the weather.
Right.
And, people wear, very nice jackets now, keep them very warm. And, you get out and about even when it's snowing. So, all right, the main thing was to keep the snow and rain off, but actually get that feeling you're outside still. You can still enjoy the urban environment. So we basically did a very similar concept to schemes that we've done already in the UK about creating this sort of giant umbrella over the spaces. And that means that the worst of the rain, snow exactly is kept off. But you still have to put your coat on, and people do put their coats on. So and it makes it still feel like you're going out. You're going into an urban center to do your shopping or your leisure or go to a restaurant or what have you. But it just keeps you a bit more comfortable.
Well, let's talk about that cover for a second. It's an enormous glass canopy, which I imagine is a huge challenge just because of that much glass. You had to ship it in from Germany, which terrifies me just to think about. It's that much glass being shipped somewhere. But there's a whole bunch of unique aspects to it. So maybe you could explain some of those, just starting with how you got that thing over two separate sets of buildings. It's just a long, long canopy.
Yeah, that's right. So it's 35,000 square feet, which is pretty big. It's probably the largest of its kind, certainly in Canada. Um, it's surrounded by 7 new buildings, effectively. So it has to sort of change shape quite a bit. In fact, it ended up being quite an organic shape, which is part of its appeal. It doesn't quite touch the buildings either side. You do need to allow fresh air in, but if in the event there was a fire and there's some smoke in there, the smoke needs to
Go somewhere,
evacuate safely so people can get out of the building. And so it's some rain, some snow will get in. That's inevitable. So the spaces underneath are fully laid to falls and drains and all that sort of thing. There's even some heating under the some of the floors to melt off the snow and that sort of stuff. But what I felt was really important here is that we had one unified roof. And that's quite a different concept to the last roof I did, or set of roofs, where I did a project in Oxford in the UK. In Oxford, it's a very granular, intricate city. It's very historic, and so one huge roof wouldn't be appropriate. So we tended to make a series of separate roofs that broke down the scale. But here we've got a huge development, very tall buildings. You actually wanted something stronger and more powerful. And so actually working this idea of a quad mesh, what that means is that effectively there are square panes of glass, approximately 5 feet square. That acts as a sort of net that can actually cover all of these spaces. And you need a certain amount of loft, of height, in order to structurally span these spaces and also create drainage. And it's interesting that the varied spaces actually lended themselves to this idea of almost hills that we created. So there's we pulled up elements of this roof. So you've got a series of mounds that interconnect, and that's where you get this beautiful undulating form. Which I think is really striking, and I'm really happy with the way it's worked. And in the event, we working with RJC engineers, we were able to get all of the member sizes a consistent size. We didn't have to have some thicker than others. So it was a very efficient use of structure. You did mention that it was made in Germany by Joseph Gartner's. They are specialists in this type of roof, and they won the contract. And it was made in large sections.
Okay.
And those sections were, broken up and taken over, and the whole thing was craned into position. It was fully scaffolded with a safety deck to make sure the operatives could work safely on that. And then the scaffolding is taken away, and it reveals this incredible space underneath. It's a lot of people, I think, say, what's the most memorable thing about the well? And I think nearly 100% will say the roof canopy.
Does that undulating and sort of the mound structure, does that help with, because snow is going to accumulate, it's Toronto, so does that kind of drain off because of that?
Yes, exactly. So we calculated that this roof will take up to about 5 feet of snow.
Okay.
And we won't let it get more than that through trace heating. And the gutters at the perimeter mean that there's plenty of snow can melt off, and that all may melt off safely. I think that the roof canopy could take more snow if necessary, but we've got residential, and you don't want that snow to be creeping up on people's windows.
Exactly.
So it's about interfacing with the different uses. There's offices, there's residential, that surrounds that. So that's another interesting part of the design, actually, is that the perimeter generally is horizontal. And that's so that you can get these other uses. You don't want to have a roof arcing in front of someone's bedroom window or living room. So that actually gave us a discipline of this horizontal that lofts up. Apart from the spine, where it does actually loft up on the part of the perimeter.
Also, there's things called frits. I didn't know what these were, but I'm also not a design person. So that apparently keep birds from hitting this thing. So maybe explain how that works and what a frit is in the first place.
Yeah, so a frit is basically a ceramic dot that is actually baked onto the glass surface. So it's like a permanent white or silver dot, and you can do whatever sort of pattern or textures you want here, but it was designed fundamentally to make sure that in warm summers that you don't actually get too hot from the sun underneath, so it reflects quite a lot of light. It does exactly what you said in terms of it deters birds from flying up or down through the glass, which it can be a problem with a lot of glass like this. But it also has another benefit, and that is that glass roofs at night basically create this sort of endless black, vista, if you like. And what it does is it actually, the luminance within creates this sort of semi-transparent layer, which I think brings the scale down quite nicely. So it does look very dramatic at night, having a certain amount of light reflecting off this fritting.
You've also used different materials like terracotta. Where was terracotta used? I hear terracotta, I think of the statues, but I'm sure there's more other practical uses for it than that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's something that my first sort of visits to Toronto and the area of King West, it's characterized by these brick and beam warehouses. And there's a really rich use of brick and terracotta. So to me, if this was going to be part of King West and not trying to be different from King West so much, is to at least draw on this materiality. So there's a number of different brick colors that we've used to sort of harmonize together, ranging from reds, oranges, browns. But we have this idea that of 7 buildings, as they progress around the site, they start off in quite a traditional way. We use them hand laid in an American bond, very traditional, just like the warehouses you see. And each building gets that little bit more refined, and the bricks change proportions, become a little bit more machine made, bit more contemporary, until we end up with this beautiful terracotta ceramic tiles that we use on one of the buildings in a lighter color. And finally, there's a building which has the large office building above that is a terracotta colored rain screen. So this gives this sort of earthen palette. And I think one of the aspects I really think successful of the well is this kind of earthen quality to the colors and textures. You feel like it's not artificial, it's part of the surrounding neighborhood. So it was very a conscious decision to get that palette of materials working in harmony together.
And it sounds like this whole complex is in effect a neighborhood unto itself. And was that part of the design process as well?
Well, it actually, because it's so dense, you've got 7.7 acres. It's got nearly 2,000 apartments. You've got potentially 11,000 people living and working in the well. So it's almost like a micro city.
Right. Yeah.
And it's creates its own economy. So in terms of retail, you've got 360,000 square feet of retail space, and in the traditional sense, you'd be talking about maybe a half an hour or 1 hour drive or travel to get to these centres. The Well's really different. It's a 2-kilometre walk. So all the audience is there on site and in the surrounding area. If you visit Toronto and you're walking about, you'll come across the Well. So it really doesn't need long journeys to support it. It's near transport, you can park there, of course, but it's just, it's very much acts as just part of the city, and the density really helps it because it's got that vibrancy and activity there all the time.
Just in terms of retail, there's been a move away from big anchor, like say Sears or somebody. There's, that's kind of going by the wayside now, just financially and for other reasons. Did you have to account for that? And is this, like in the European sense, a lot of smaller shops, or was it a mix of bigger and smaller?
The retail mix is really interesting. I think that's where retail's really evolving. If you were doing something like this 20 years ago, you'd be focusing on fashion stores,
Right.
and it was not so much in the way of food and beverage, pit stop coffee, that perhaps,
Right.
but I mentioned earlier that this is more about experience and lifestyle. So there's a range of really interesting tenants at the Well. There's Arcadia Earth, which is civic experience using 3D goggles and that sort of thing. You've got Sweat and Tonic, which is a gym where you can have a drink afterwards. Lots of restaurants. You've got the Wellington Market, which is now open, which is 70,000 square feet and over 50 different food offers. So there is retail there, but there's also banks, there's dentists, there's hair salons, there's also everything for your sort of everyday need, really. And there's fashion stores and sort of homewares and that sort of thing. So I think it's ended up being more eclectic than we probably imagined at the start, but that's just how the market is going. And I think it's a very interesting mix of shops on 3 levels.
And I would assume that's fairly adaptable too, as to like when something goes out of fashion, or let's say a business goes out of business, you can sort of, it's more modular in that sense, I would assume.
Exactly, yeah. So it's all designed so that you can change the tenancy walls very, very easily and that sort of thing. So if you need bigger units, no problem. You just extend them, or you can break it up into smaller units if that's what the market is looking for.
And you mentioned 3 stories. That's the colonnade, right? So maybe you could explain how that colonnade features within all this.
Yeah, exactly. So effectively, there's this journey from the corner of Spadina and Front, which is, let's say, that's the main entrance. Although there's 7 entrances, it's completely permeable. But there's a curved multi-level street which everyone just called the spine. That the spine is the sort of it makes sense because it's almost like this sort of key
the high street
retail corridor, if you like, and it's partly colonnaded, so that you get this feeling you're walking inside buildings, or you can walk outside the buildings in a street, and then you've got this dynamic of these bridges that cross over. They almost look random, but they're the way they're set out on this curve. They do create a really interesting composition of these bridge crossing at different angles, at different heights, and so forth. So yeah, I mean, there's a certain amount of retail theatre, as we call it. So I think anyone visiting the Well, if you come in from the Spadina entrance, you do get faced with this set of choices as you arrive. You can either go straight up an escalator to that second floor and experience it that way, or you can continue at ground level, but it splits either side of stairs going down, and so you can walk in these colonnaded sides, or as I say, you can descend these stairs and you get the sort of full drama of this really tall space. It's about 75 feet high, and it's like a cathedral. It's really quite a surprise when you come off Spadina, and actually that's exactly what we wanted. So a bit of wow as you enter.
Now, I guess finally I'd ask, in terms of scale, it sounds like one of the biggest retail things you've ever worked on. Have you seen other interest in people in designing similar things in other areas because of this? Because not everybody lives in Toronto; they can't all go visit it. Maybe this is coming to them soon. Who knows?
Yeah, I suppose this is an evolution of things we've done. I mean, I think that the well really is unique, but it comes off the back of a similar curved galleria that we designed in Edinburgh, which is on 4 or 5 stories. Although the well, I think overall as a development's bigger. And I mentioned a scheme in Oxford that we did, which was joining a series of buildings with a series of individual canopies. So in terms of the next one, I'm open to offers, so I'm very interested in doing this somewhere else. And I hope people visit the well and enjoy those sort of spaces. Then it perhaps gives some inspiration of what you can do. You don't have to do a standard retail mall. You can do something that's much more urban in character and interesting and works with the surrounding neighborhood.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us today, Adrian.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Construction Record Podcast. You can hear us on Apple Music, Amazon, and Spotify, as well as at theconstructionrecord.libsyn.com and on the Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce websites. Thanks again for listening.